Hello everyone, welcome back. And we have a good but kind of clunky hand. We will keep, but we'll not really be that happy. The problem with a hand like this is because it's so clunky, you lose any tempo, and you're in a situation where you're kind of hoping that you draw lands, but you also need removal spells. So I got the removal spell. I could use some untapped mana. Looks like I'm up against something similar, which is pretty interesting. So on the one hand, it would be kind of nice to play the Llanowar Waste just so that I can get a creature on the board that potentially fights something with Dromoka's command. But if my opponent just plays like Anafenza, that's not so good. So I really want to play Sylvan Advocate though, I'm not gonna lie. I think the better move is just if he plays Anafenza, it's just such bad news. So I'm only get to play one untapped land so far. I think the most likely thing to happen is that I play Anafenza and then play Deathmist Raptor as my turn 3 and turn 4 play, and then play the Siege Rhino on turn 5. But things will obviously change with this Transgress the Mind. If I knew my opponent was going to play Transgress, I certainly would have played Sylvan Advocate last turn. I do like giving myself an opportunity to get lucky in the sense that I'll play a 2-drop and say, if I draw an untapped land, my draw is going to like become nuts. So because my opponent played the Transgress the Mind, I'm actually more likely to, I think, play the Deathmist Raptor first. Okay, so we're against Mardu green. So they don't have that many Abzan Charms. Ooh, Surrak is so good. Oh, I love going just Anafenza into Surrak. It's such gas. But we're going to have to hold our horses on that play. So against the Mardu green deck, I would rather lean on the Deathmist Raptor. If it was against another Abzan deck, I like leaning on the Anafenza first, because it means that a Dromoka's command can fight through an opposing Anafenza or an opposing Siege Rhino or an opposing Gideon. But this Mardu green deck gets a lot more removal based, and so I just want to play the more resilient threat. Or I should say the disposable threat. Deathmist Raptors is one of the things that can really be a big problem for these Mardu green decks. Because while they're playing Read the Bones and Painful Truths to get card advantage, I'm just playing creatures. So I get to get ahead on the board, I deal a lot of damage to them, their life total can become really vulnerable, and I still have, you know, about as good card advantage as them, and they really don't have an answer for Deathmist Raptor. So like if this guy doesn't have a lot of pressure on me, that Deathmist Raptor's it's going to come back at some point. Another one of the good sources of card advantage in my deck is Bear of Silence, especially for matches like this. The Mardu green decks, they just don't have any real token generation. They're pretty threat light, so they basically have to kill every single thing you play. And Bear of Silence is always going to hit something good. So I think what I'm going to do here is just play my Advocate. there's a good chance that my opponent tries to use something like a Roast or Fiery Impulse on it, and I'd be able to use my Dromoka's command for some good value. And I don't really want to play the Surrak on that turn, because I'd rather have it be a little bit more of a surprise. I don't really want to, obviously I don't want to play the Bear of Silence because I want to use that as a removal spell. Another thing that can be nice too is if my opponent plays Chandra and tries to -3, I can just use Dromoka's command to save it, which can be a pretty powerful play. So Dark Dwellers is a little annoying, depending on what he targets. He may just target the Fire Impulse and save the Crackling Doom for something else. What is he targeting? Oh, Transgress the Mind? Okay, well he's going to get my Surrak, which is a little annoying, but certainly not the end of the world. I'm still going to be able to just kill his guy and attack with the team. Little bit of a shame. I have to imagine that there's a good chance if I played the Surrak, my opponent, well, then my opponent would just Goblin Dark Dwellers for Crackling Doom. So Goblin Dark Dwellers is going to get that Surrak either way, I guess. Ooh, that's good. Now we get to whack for even more. And keep our Dromoka's command up, which is also pretty nice. So a lot of times these Mardu green decks will play some number of Kalitases, which can actually be a pretty big problem for my deck. Usually if a Kalitas comes early, it's really bad for me, but if they come late when we're in a top deck war, sometimes it's not so bad. The reason for that is if it comes down early, it's usually pretty unlikely that I have a removal spell for it, so my deck is pretty removal light. This is particularly true for post-board scenarios where I'll usually trim a little bit of removal. And in the early part of the game, it's a lot easier for me to use a Dromoka's command to fight it because there's a greater chance I can catch them. Or excuse me, later in the game, it's like by then it's more likely that I've drawn a removal spell to actually deal with it. So despite my opponent's Read the Bones and Goblin Dark Dwellers, we're essentially even on resources. He's got 3 cards in hand. I've got 2 spells on the board and 1 in hand. He's got 2 creature lands. I've got 2 creature lands. He is ahead by 1 land. But that's not that big of a deal. And this is pretty annoying. So this could be bad. So if I had another land, I could activate my Shambling Vent and double fight. I can activate my land and attack and deal with it that way, potentially. I don't really want to try to do that on defense. It's pretty unlikely that my opponent blocks here. But on the offhand chance he does, I'll 2-for-1 myself to get rid of this Kalitas. But I would rather do that than let it sit on the board. Because it is something that I do have a hard time dealing with. The rest of his deck is easy. Like I can just recur Deathmist Raptors and take some damage from some stuff and then gain the life back with a Siege Rhino or Shambling Vent. And by constantly putting pressure on his life, it puts him in a really bad spot. But Kalitas is just like the one card engine that really cramps my style. Obviously, I could have double Dromoka's command my Bearer of Silence, but I don't really want to 3-for-1 myself. Let's not get crazy. I'll 2-for-1 myself to kill the Kalitas, but I don't want to 3-for-1 myself. If I 3-for-1 myself, I feel like there's a good chance that I just can't win. If I 2-for-1 myself, I can still win. I have Abzan Charm, Ultimate Price, and Valorous Stance that I'll kill it. The thing that's tricky about these Dromoka's commands are playing a creature and then trying to fight is a little bit of a perilous proposition. So see what my opponent has. Wow. Well, that's certainly one way to protect him from Abzan Charm. It's pretty annoying. So, Ronnie has no cards in hand. Oh! Oh, nothing makes me happier than just a sick top deck. Oh my god. I'm sorry if I just blew everyone's ears out, but that was just too delightful. You are dead. Pwned. Dude, my opponent's gotta be on such tilt right now. Let's see. I think that I want to attack with a creature land. Yeah, I'll just attack with the creature land. Because he's at the point where he can just attack with 2 lands, so... I guess I'll just keep it back. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. Man, that was just brutal. Sorry. That's literally what I live for. It's just those situations where you just have some sick top deck to blow out your opponent, and it's so apparent that you just drew that card. It wasn't like you meticulously planned the situation. It was just super cut and dry. Yep, I just drew this. Right, so... basically going to get whacked in the face by that Siege Rhino, which is a little annoying. But that's just the way it's going to go. It was kind of my opponent's fault for using Abzan Charm on his Kalitas. I can certainly understand why he did it. think it would have been better just to draw 2 cards, though. I mean, he's gaining 3 life a turn. He knows that he's got the Dromoka's commands, though, and he may think that that's, like, most of my removal. Like, if he just thinks I have Dromoka's commands and Grasp in Darkness, I guess it's a little reasonable. I hope my opponent doesn't have, like, another Siege Rhino. So it's starting to become a problem. I must wonder if I should activate a Shambling Vent here and put a +1/+1 counter on it. Just so that I can attack and gain some life. Even if I gain 3 life with my Shambling Vent, I'll only be at 7, and he can attack me for 8. So it's not worth it, fortunately. So I can certainly attack with one of them, though. If he activates the Hissing Quagmire, I'll just put a +1/+1 counter on the Shambling Vent and have it the Bear of Silence fight. Two, 3, 4, 5, 6. He only has 1 source of white, so he can only crack back for 6. So I should be safe to do this. If he has a removal spell, I'm dead. So I kind of assume that the card in his hand is a land, and I'm really hoping it's not a land that taps for... Oh, he only has 1 black and only 1 white. So he's actually pretty far from activating both creature lands. He has anything that can be some hasted power and toughness, I'm dead. Goblin Dark Dwellers would kill me. Siege Rhino would kill me. Also, Crackling Doom would kill me. Oh! Oh, now I'm dead. That was a shame. Man, I had such a sick top deck. I really needed a Den Protector. 1 Den Protector would have been great. I actually didn't really draw any, like, get any card advantage. Oh well. Well, we are toast. Sick game, though. Even though I lost, I would play that game again if I could. So I don't do a whole lot of sideboarding. I just take out the ultimate price, bring in the Valorous Stance, and then I'll take the Surrak for Gideon. There are situations where Surrak is better than Gideon, but it's so likely that all my creatures are going to die that I just like taking the Gideon out. The other thing that I like to do sometimes, that, well, I should say a lot of other people like to do, is bring in Wingmate Rocs. Sometimes I don't actually like doing that, though, because it requires you to, like, they get sniped by Transgress the Mind, just makes your deck a little clunkier. In this particular case, though, I think I'm going to take out 2 of the Wardens for 2 Wingmate Rocs. And then it should be all set. So I'm a little bit of a Wingmate Roc hater. And if you watch me stream, you'll note that sometimes I just won't even bring in the Wingmate Rocs. I'll just keep my deck lower to the ground. And in this situation, I think that I'm just going to go turn 2 Warden, turn 3 Deathmist Raptor. Otherwise, I'm just taking a ton of damage. In this particular case, though, I think this. So a lot of times I do like to play things kind of as aggressively as possible. But in this matchup, my life total does matter a little bit. I wanted to get a white land on the board earlier rather than later. So this hand's shaping up pretty nicely. My opponent has Crackling Doom. It's only going to hit my Deathmist Raptor. And this Dromoka's command is going to be something that I can use to clear a path. And if my opponent tries to transgress the mind me, he sees nothing. I almost thought about taking out this Warden for another fat thing, but pretty happy that I didn't. Wow, that is great. So I feel very far ahead. And I'm even safe against a sweeper. Not safe against Languish, but against the red one, I am safe. And if he plays Siege Rhino, I'll just kill it. So I have to imagine that I'm a huge favorite from this position. Especially because my opponent does have to worry about card advantage, and he still has cards like Painful Truths and Read the Bones in his deck. So if his hand is just lining up in a way where that's what he needs to do this turn, he's going to be in, pretty close to an unwinnable situation. Did I forget to play a land? Dude, I forgot to play a land. LOL. Oh well. I didn't need that land anyway, but that was pretty bad. I'm filming this pretty late at night. It's way past my bedtime. But this week has been pretty intense. And, just couldn't be helped. So I feel like my opponent might have Crackling Doom. Ooh, Abzan Charm's good. That is the way to deal with that card. So being a turn behind on my land drops is actually a little annoying. I'm not too interested in leveling up the Warden. I don't think it's particularly likely that it will live to deal devastating damage. If it does, that would be great. I do have the lands for it. But I'm a little more interested in holding up my removal spells. I would prefer to keep my pressure on the board. And that's kind of my top priority right now. That was a good draw. So even though it's a good draw, I think that I'd rather clear a path. So I think there's a good chance that my opponent has some sort of 2-mana removal spell. So on the plus side, I could Dromoka's Command and fight, and Valorous Stance, and potentially knock my opponent down to... Like, if he cracks his fetch land for a removal spell, and I Valorous Stance in response. I'm going to win the fight. He's going to take 1 damage from his fetch, and I'm going to deal 6 to knock him to 1. And putting him to 1 with a Siege Rhino in my hand is a pretty good place to be. But I think that I'm just going to play the Siege Rhino now, and the removal spells next turn. If he tries to do something in combat, it's just kind of the way it goes, but... This still puts him in just such a bad spot. Putting him at 1's pretty sweet because it just makes all fetch lands dead. But on his turn, if he like taps out for a Siege Rhino, I'll just kill him. So I know this game I just forgot to play a land 1 turn. And oh, one of my opponent has Murderous Cut. That's pretty good. So considering my opponent's only at 4 lands, it seems like he's been missing a land drop too. Yeah. My opponent plays Siege Rhino, and that's when I knew that the game was over and I would win. To be fair, this would have been true even if like basically no matter what I did. So it's a little irrelevant, but equally fun to say. You know, just, oh yeah, my opponent played Siege Rhino and I knew that he was dead. GG! Alright, so I don't think anything changes when I'm on the draw. Actually, it wouldn't be crazy to, instead of having the Wingmate Rocs and Wardens, to have like Transgress the Mind. But it gets really dangerous to be so creature light when you have Dromoka's Command in your hand. Dromoka's Command is not as good of a removal spell in those scenarios where we each have a lot of mana. Basically, in the early part of the game where tempo matters, Dromoka's Command is great because you can use it when your opponent is tapped out. And then later in the game, you want to use it, generally speaking, to protect your creatures from removal spells. So this is a hand where I may actually play this Bearer of Silence on turn 2. Not anymore. No need. I really like playing a creature on 2 mana. I just feel like it's a great way to get ahead because so frequently your opponent is just playing come to play tapped lands. And being able to get the initiative is great. But now potentially I'm going to be able to answer his next 2 creatures, and if he doesn't do anything impactful on the board, I'm going to be able to deploy some sweet threats. So I'd say things are going pretty good. And it's probably like the best thing you can do here is just end of turn, like Crackling Doom my Anafenza, untap, play a Siege Rhino. But I'm just gonna play, like, if he does that, that like seems great, but I'll just Bearer of Silence him. And wow, and my opponent has nothing. And he got a basic swamp? That doesn't make any sense. Does he have Languish? Siege Rhino. Siege Rhino. Well, that's really bad. Bad news for my opponent. Oh, I have so many options. How will I destroy you? So the one thing that I do have to do is if I want to cast this Bearer of Silence, I do need both my pain lands out. Now this is just brutal. This is just... It's too good. I will 2-for-1 you and whack you for 7. And this is why you need to make sure your deck isn't clunky. My opponent was on the play, cast a Siege Rhino, which is supposed to be one of the great cards of the format. It just wasn't good enough. My opponent has a big sweeper to catch up. That'll be good, but no, that's not a sweeper. That just says kill one thing and gain 2 life on this board. So yeah, just not good enough. So I have to imagine my opponent is basically dead. My hand is pretty stacked. I have 2 removal spells that I can cast in 1 turn. They're both pretty flexible also. So this is probably going to be, this is like the point where I say, okay, I haven't won the game yet, but I've basically done what I wanted to do this game. The goal of my deck was to get myself in position where I was just far ahead on the board and capitalize on my opponent not having a deck as efficient as mine. So even though I was on the draw, the fact that I had a fairly efficient hand and my opponent had a fairly inefficient hand is great for me. Well, that kills 2 things, and then I'm going to kill him with Abzan Charm and Siege Rhino. This is the wonderful flexibility of Abzan Charm. Sometimes Abzan Charm kills your opponent. GG!